This show is sponsored by PowerfulWomenUSA.com, a place to be inspired by successful women. Hey everybody, I'm Jill Conway, and this is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating and supporting strong and successful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping that you will be inspired to pursue your dreams, feel empowered, reclaim your voice, and discover your strengths. So my guest today is Nina Purewal. She's co-author of the international best-selling book, Let That Sht Go. Find peace of mind and happiness in your everyday. So Nina, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. I'm truly honored.
Thank you so much. Let's begin with this book, because as I mentioned to you before we started, I've been reading it, and I love the way you tackle these issues, and I'm on a quest for mindfulness myself, and obviously the pursuit of happiness, and I think that's, gosh, isn't that what everybody is pursuing, right?
Absolutely. Everyone's on a path to find happiness, and one of the fundamentals that I talk about is, and I have to preface that I spent a year in a monastery in the middle of my corporate career.
Wow.
But one of the things that they talked about was that, and you hear Eckhart Tolle and, all of the spiritual masters, if you will, talk about this, how our true nature is happiness. Mm-hmm. It is joy, right? If you think of yourself as an infant or a toddler, like, they're inherently happy, and you were that at one point too. So at some point along the way, when you were 5 or 6, a parent or a teacher or a coach or someone started saying things to you, you started building up this record in your mind and became a version of yourself through other people's eyes instead of seeing your true nature. So when people say, I'm on a search to find happiness, I say the happiness is in letting go, hence let that go.
Right.
Of all the things that we've accumulated, because you're already there. You're already that happy being.
Right. Ooh, so right, you're already born to be happy, but through whatever has happened, the people in your life, or the things that have happened to your life, you start to get weighed down in the gunk of it.
Exactly. And the patterns that we pick up in childhood, we're fully functioning adults thinking that we're not good enough. And sometimes we can even hear that person's voice, and that's the imposter in our mind. So it really is this undoing. It's not like trying to find it. It's the undoing of what is blocking us from accessing that happiness.
Right. So who would you say, is this book for everybody? Who would benefit the most from reading this book?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jill. When we worked with our publisher, it was really kind of written for women ages 25 to 40. And if you read into the tone, you can kind of pick up on that.
Right.
But to our surprise, we wrote it in 2018. We've had all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life in all different countries around the world, old or young or genders. It appeals to people who I think are just meant to read it at the time. So I thought there was a demographic, especially having like a marketing background, but it just seems to be for whoever needs it at the time. And it's really blown me away, actually.
Yeah, because I saw your posts on social media, and it's translated into so many different languages. It's fantastic. That's truly like the pinch me moment for you.
So many pinch me moments on the book journey specifically. Really, we thought it would be out, especially because we got rejected by 18 publishers in the U.S. because we're Canadian girls who didn't have a platform, and self-help is oversaturated. So, never give up, because 2.5 years later we launched in the U.S. and became a bestseller in a number of different aspects, which is, again, it's shocking, but at the same time, there's a lot of surrender and trust in when you follow the path. Right. Things just kind of start to fall into place, and that's the story of the book, really.
Well, let's talk about that quick, because so how did you come about? This is not your first book. I should say that, right? But
oh no, it is.
Oh, it is the first, because I know you have others.
It's my first. We might be working on another, but
oh, okay, yeah,
yeah.
All right, so So how did it, did you, I know you're into mindfulness and meditation, and we'll talk about that too. So, but what made you, was there something in a meditation or something that said you need to start writing this? You need to start, doing a book? How did you actually get the thought, and how did it translate to, okay, I'm writing this with someone else? With Katie?
I actually had no intentions to write a book. I never I'm more of a math science geek, so just never had any intentions to become an author. Kate and I, my co-author, were doing workshops in downtown Toronto hotels around, she had this funny idea to put swearing in the title, and that was in at the time, like the AF, so
right.
Or learn how to get your F in finances in order, or, she hired people. And so I was doing the mindfulness and meditation ones, and HarperCollins, our publisher, caught wind of it, and they just said, we love how you're talking about it. It's so approachable. Would you be willing to write a book? We kind of looked at each other and went like, what? And so they gave us 9 weeks to write it.
No pressure. Oh my goodness.
No pressure. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. And, we were off to the races. So, to be honest, it came from the intention for sure. When I came back from the monastery in 2011, I knew, I loved my corporate job. I worked in sales and marketing in the consumer packaged goods industry for a long time. I worked in startup for a while. But I knew there was something inside me that was like, this is what you're meant to do. Because when I came back from the monastery, I thought so much of this incredible knowledge and wisdom is applicable to what people face in the corporate world and stress. So, how do I kind of align the two and cross-pollinate, all of this great anti-stress, anti-anxiety, practical wisdom into the corporate sector? And that's kind of where it all started.
Wow. So what led you to go to a monastery? That's the glaring question. So, I mean, you've lived, there's a lot has gone on in your life, and I know we'll go into depth more, later on in the show, but going to a monastery is heavy.
Yeah, it was actually one of those inner knowing things. And I was right in the middle of climbing the corporate ladder, doing well. I was repressing and suppressing childhood trauma, which we'll get to, but I was doing really well in my career. And then this opportunity came up to do a 1-year course in the Redwoods. And it was almost an intuitive thing, like now or never. Before, life was really busy. And so I took a year sabbatical, and I was very addicted to work. I was addicted to, I'm going to date myself with my crackberry. I was working, I was reporting into the U.S. office, and it was a lot. And so I'm like, something needs to change. Like, this can't be, something I need to check myself.
Right.
And so I completely unplugged that year. I told friends and family, if you want to get a hold of me, write me a letter. And I sent and received 150 letters.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But it was just back to basics. And it's incredible how much stuff comes up when you don't have the phone and you don't have internet and you don't have work distractions. Suddenly you're getting to self and core. And it's scary, but it's healing.
Wow. So you went there for a year? How long did you go there for?
A year.
Wow.
Yep.
God bless you. That's a long time. It is. I mean, you think about, I would think a couple of months. Was there a point when you were there that it was like, you know what? I don't know. It's been 6 months. I'm ready to go. Or no, you were like, I'm all in. I'm all in for.
Absolutely. No.
Okay.
It was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, but one of the most challenging.
Sure.
Sold the house, you get there and you're like, what on earth? And I think that's important to let people know that when you get that intuition, when you get that drive, when you get that idea, it's a surge, but then it's no decision's ever 100%.
Right.
We can't expect life to be like that. There's going to be risks, there's going to be pros and cons. And you're going to have those, especially if you move to entrepreneurship or do something a little. I mean, everyone at the time in my corporate office or financial advisor, they thought I was completely off the wall.
Right.
We were in a financial crisis at the time.
Right.
So
when you should probably be putting your head down, and they want you to work, and you want to, and then you say, wait, you know what, guys, I'm hitting a timeout for myself.
Yeah, and life's too short, right? I learned the hard way really young that anything can end tomorrow. So it motivates me. Like, it's not meant to be daunting. It's just meant to propel you into, like, what, okay, if you really just had a year left, if you really just had 6 months left, if you had 5 years left, my history has just made me think like that. Obviously, there's a huge practicality to it all, leaving corporate life and moving into entrepreneurship and all that, but or taking the year off for the ashram. But now it's the catalyst. And even when I came back, I mean, the housing market was blown up. I had to reassess myself in the corporate world.
That must have been hard.
Scary time.
That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was. And I also was lost because I didn't know what to make of this knowledge. I knew I didn't want to do corporate sales and marketing, but it was where my expertise was. And no one was talking about mental health in the workplace.
Right.
This was 2011.
Right.
So it wasn't until 2017 that I started my business that I was like, okay, I think the world is ready to address wellness. And some companies started doing mindfulness and work like Google. And so it was time. And I can see the difference now when I started and the push to be like, you need this. You need, like, over 95% of people are stressed out at work to now it's like, there's budgets aside for wellness. And it's so great because at the end of the day, we're all humans working for organizations. Right? We're all real people going through real things.
Right. And I think for so many years, people kind of didn't want to hear about it. They just wanted you to show up for work, and it doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life, right? It was very sad.
There's just compartmentalization. I think COVID helped with that. The pandemic helped. Like, we're all on videos. You see everybody's kids or pets or everything in the background. There was this integration. Yeah. And, we spend more time at work with the people, with our families during the week, right? So it's important to love what you do and feel psychologically safe and all the things around wellness in the workplace.
Yeah. All right. So there are 9 chapters in the book, and you discuss everything. It's called, goodbye to the past, future worries, self-love, acceptance, authenticity. And you offer over, there's over 100 tips, for help that you give to help people find this peaceful place within themselves. So in part of the book, you say, become aware of your thought patterns because, quote, and I'll read this part, being conscious of your thoughts can help to make you less reactive to the daily business that pops up. You're better able to either table it, accept it, or let it go. So let's jump in. How does one find peace of mind?
That's a really, really great question.
Easy for you, right? Like, that's like what everyone wants to know, right? Like,
that's what everyone wants to know. It's really about knowing the nature of your mind. And I've read a lot of, science around this as well. And it's so great because when I got into this stuff in the 90s, there was no science backing, but now there's so many, people that study the brain, neurologists and neuroscientists that have done MRI scans to see the impact. But we think on average 60,000 thoughts a day. And that translates to 35 to 42 thoughts a minute. And 80% of our thoughts are said to be negative, quote unquote, or self-deprecating.
Wow.
Okay. And 95% of our thoughts are a repeat from the day before. So we're stuck in a cycle. And the only way out of it, and there's a saying in the book, we say, in order to let that stuff go, you need to bring that stuff to surface. And when we're on autopilot, we have such little control. We have no control over our thoughts. It's just, so in the book, we talk about the awareness of our thoughts. We use the chatty mind and observing mind. And the chatty mind is the mind that is thinking all of these 60,000 thoughts a day. And the observing mind just observes. It doesn't try to solve for them. It doesn't judge yourself for thinking these thoughts. It just says, oh, there you go, Jill. You're at home and you're thinking about work again, or you're at the spa and you're feeling guilty. It just observes.
Right.
Because once you get into the 5th or 6th thought about something, you're going down the rabbit hole. Right?
Ooh, yeah. It's so true, though.
So it's catching and it's a constant thing. It's like going to the gym for your mind. Like, you can work for 6 months to get the 6-pack. It ain't going to stay if you stop going, right?
Right.
It's a constant awareness. But I always say to my clients, awareness is half the battle.
Right.
These are some really deep-seated childhood, even trauma thoughts that are deeply rooted. This is neuroplasticity. We are rewiring your brain by becoming aware of how it's working and then unplugging and then replugging. Like like how do we see ourselves now versus how does the world see us? And it's amazing when I do imposter syndrome workshops, how people view themselves, especially people who identify as women, I find.
Right. Well, you use an example in the book, and I think it was like driving the car to work. Like, just be in the car, right? Don't jump ahead to the 150 things that you have to do, and you have to return that letter to whomever, and you have to send that email to that other person for tomorrow. It's like, just be in the car. Notice the trees while you're driving.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Keep yourself in the here and now. And it is an active thing. It's an active, there's lots of practical examples in the book about how to, apply mindfulness. And the process of mindfulness is really going from your mind having control over you to you having more control over your mind through the awareness of what's going on in there. Otherwise, the other tip I give to clients is treat it like a child. Give it a name. It's like this out of control toddler that is like going into the darkest corners at 2 o'clock in the morning and running off, and treat it like a child and say, no, we're not, Tommy, we're not doing that today. Sorry. And then you just gain control back over the moment. And that's also what mindfulness is being mentally present where you're physically present.
Right. So what do you say? So it's so funny because I know I read that or I saw that you like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'm a big Dr. Joe fan. So when you say that, it's true. It's like you have to like, and he said that too. Like, treat it like your mind's a child, where you're like, okay, no, I know you have to go return that email, but sit here, because that is where it is. It's the control of the thoughts that is really the transformative part.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize control doesn't mean repress or suppress.
Right.
Sometimes control means it's coming up and it's like, oh my God, that's heavy.
Right.
And then we deal with it. We work through it, or we go to therapy, or you work through, because otherwise it's just sitting in there in your body, in your mind somewhere, and it won't go unless you again, bring it to surface.
Well, I don't think most people realize until you really do sit down, because I've done the work too, and it's when you really, really sit down and by yourself, and maybe for me it's easier sometimes to write my thoughts, and you don't, and you keep asking why do I feel that way? Why? And then you realize, you get down to the nitty gritty and you're like, oh, what? You mean when that thing happened to 40 years ago, that's what is still triggering me,
Yes. And then as soon as you unlock that, it's like, it's freedom. And I'll give you an example. I did trauma healing with a wonderful woman named Jill Conway. And we got down to, we were all kind of afraid of my dad growing up. Mm-hmm. And we all kind of walked eggshells around him. And she said, you learned at a really young age, because I was a chronic people pleaser, like in my 20s and 30s. So she's like, you learned at a really young age how to sit in your own discomfort for the comfort of someone else.
Ooh, say that again.
Yeah. You learned how to sit in your own discomfort for the comfort of someone else. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's deep.
So,
yeah.
It's deep. These patterns are deep. And here I am, again, a fully functioning adult sitting in my own discomfort constantly because I don't want to speak up, because I'm afraid, because I don't want to upset someone, because I don't want to disappoint someone, because I want everybody to like me, and suddenly it was like, whoa, my dad passed away. He's not, like, why am I
still doing it?
It's so irrational. I think that's the key, is when you really dig to the bottom, like how you're like, this is what I was talking, it's rational what we take into adulthood if we don't build the awareness to see what's going on.
Well, I mean, wow, that is so powerful. I think that alone, right? I really do. That's amazing. I want to talk more about too. I mean, the pursuit of happiness, and that we're all searching for happiness. I know we have about a minute 30 before the break, but is it attainable? Can you be happy for a long period of time, like forever? Can you find happiness and be in it forever? My producer Joe is laughing.
It's a great question, and I think it's a choice, right? We choose. Our actions, we choose our thoughts, we choose. Some people feel so stuck, but sometimes sometimes economically there isn't a choice. Sometimes there is, but there's, I always went, when I was a teenager, I went by the quote of life is 10% what you make it and 90% how you take it. Ooh. And I think that part is so important with the happiness piece. No one's going to do it for you. Yeah. So if you want to find that, if you want to unpack all the stuff, then, you can have more moments. Life is never going to be perfect. There's always, we'll follow up after the break of it.
I know you hear the music, right? Because you're saying such great stuff. I don't want to interrupt, but we'll be back with Nina Purewal after the commercial break. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. If you love what you're listening to, head to powerfulwomenusa.com for previous shows, upcoming events. You can also follow us, everybody, on Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube, and share this with a friend. We'll be back. This show is sponsored by PowerfulWomenUSA.com, a place to be inspired by successful women. Hey, everybody, I'm Jill Conway, and this is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating and supporting strong and successful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping that you will be inspired to pursue your dreams, feel empowered, reclaim your voice, and discover your strengths. So my guest today is the co-author of the international bestseller, Let That Sht Go. So, Nina, let's bring you back in. And we were talking about happiness before the break. Yes. So, and I wanted to read something that you said in your book. It said, regarding the pursuit of happiness. It says, we're all searching for happiness. We all want to be happy. But in the book, you say many people put it in the future. And they put it on the future. When I get that next job, the next car, when I'm dating, when I'm married, I'll be happy. And then you say the only person who has the capacity to bring you endless happiness is you.
Yes.
Let's go into that. So is that what you feel like most people do? They always put it on an object that they want or get, like a job in the future. Like it's always It's always in the future. It's never now.
Well, it's two things. It's in the future. So when I get that job, when I get that house, and check yourself, because when you do get that house and 10 years after you get your undergrad and maybe do your master's, when you do get that job, are you celebrating? Are you like, I worked my butt off for the last decade? No, you're wanting to be the VP, right? So
right.
You can never catch happipness if it's always when I get this, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not saying don't have goals, don't plan for the future. That's a whole workshop in and of itself.
Yeah.
But, in the second place, we tend to look for happiness is in the external, okay? So in our partners, in our jobs, in our the vacation we book, in our phones, and the things we buy, and I'm not denying that there's happiness there. There's absolutely happiness in those things. But there's also, what else? Sorrow, anger, frustration. You get the house, and now you have a mortgage payment. Now you have to do some renovations. Now you have to fix your roof. Now you have to furnish it. Right? Taxes, all the things. So again, if we put happiness in these external things, yes, you're going to find happiness, but it's temporary. It's not that permanent happiness, permanent bliss that is only found when you go inwards, not outwards. These are all outward things, and do them. They'll bring joy, but if you're looking for that permanent bliss, it's going inwards. And you asked, before the break, can we always be happy? Can we get to that part? And I'm just going to share with one of the monks, said when I was studying at the monastery, and he said, the hurricane of life is forever going to swirl. It's forever going to just be swirling ups and downs and all kinds of things. But the more you can, in the center of a hurricane is a 10 to 20 mile, it's a kilometer, I'm Canadian, radius of stillness. Right? So if you can stay in the center of that hurricane, and again, observe what's going on.
Pay attention, right? You're not ignoring, right?
Yeah. It's not suppressing, you're not not ignoring, you're not,
you see it.
Toxic. You see it.
Yeah.
You see it. And you're just present with it. And there's days where, I have all kinds of things, and I'm like, okay, today I'm really sad, or in this moment I'm really angry and I need a minute, or just be present, with your emotions. But they had all these nature analogies, and another one is if you think of the sun on a cloudy day, you know, you have no access to the sun. You're stepping in puddles, and it's cold, and it's dreary, and it's wet outside, but the sun hasn't gone anywhere. And that is like your happiness. Your happiness doesn't go anywhere. Will some dark, stormy clouds come through? Will some wispy clouds? Sure. But it's for you to acknowledge them, and they're now your responsibility to kind of work through.
Yeah. And you talk the talk and you have walked the walk. I just want the listeners to know, not only have you written this book, but you work in the grief counseling space with children at a children's center. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how you got there, how you got to that job when you said you were working in corporate. And you went through a great, great tragedy in your life when you were 16. You talk about it. Go ahead. You lost your father and your brother. And I'm very sorry. I mean, even though it was many years ago, it has to be raw sometimes still.
It's absolutely raw. It was a few decades ago now. I was 16, and my parents were going through a pretty horrid separation. And, long story short, my dad was definitely a narcissist, very controlling. And my mom she said, when my son turns 10, if this is still going on, I'm leaving. And she did. And it was about 6 months of just neurotic behavior, and then it all kind of culminated in a murder-suicide. So my dad took my brother's life, and then he took his own life, and, the details of the case are that, he planned to, it was all premeditated, so he planned to take me as well, but it was just circumstance that my mom ended up coming home earlier than expected, and I was out of the house. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it was, and this was in the 90s when nobody really talked about mental health. I mean, my mom put me in front of like a child psychologist, but there was really no support. And so I found the Season Center for Grieving Children when I was 16, and it's peer-to-peer support for children who have lost parents to all kinds of things, and sometimes there's suicide-specific groups, or there's, addiction, kids who lost parents to addiction, specific groups. It's a phenomenal organization. So the work I do now with them is volunteer. So my work is the corporate workshops and all that, the corporate coaching, but this is just, I'm now an executive grief ambassador for them because I just work to, raise awareness, and I'm also like a volunteer the facilitator, which is, I'm so grateful for the facilitators I had, because it was the only place I felt seen and heard, and not walking the hallways as a high school kid feeling like the murder-suicide girl.
Oh my God.
There was survivor's guilt. Now there's names for things, right? Like I went from a straight A student to barely making it. Luckily I got into business school and got grades through my degree. But how trauma affects your brain. Like, I just thought I was dumb. I'm like, you just must be dumb now. So there's still, I want people to know who are listening, if you've gone through trauma and, you can't focus as well, or it affects your short-term memory, like, that's normal. That's okay. And the book, What Happened to You by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry, is phenomenal at kind of unpacking how the brain trauma impacts the brain.
Well, having survived that, like you mentioned, I wouldn't have thought of it, but even at such a young age, right? I mean, you feel guilty, right? You feel guilty for surviving it almost. And
oh, big time. Big, like years of like anger towards my dad. Like I couldn't even grieve my brother because I was so angry. And then
how could you not be? I mean, how could you not be? I mean, that was...
and I felt so like I was constantly like, why didn't you just take me? Why didn't you? Like, it was just this, not that I was suicidal, but the thoughts, it was so intense. It was,
sure.
And I just did a 20-week trauma healing program for the crime scene, so it just, healing is this forever. I've done a lot on grief. I've accepted, my family is gone. I lost my mom when I was 33 to ALS.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
wow.
She was my bestie, so that was just as horrible. But, you get to, it was at the season center that I realized no one's going to pick up the pieces for you. Like, this is your path. No one's going to force you to go to school. No one's going to force you to have a career, because half the group was kind of getting into drugs and alcohol, and the other half was picking their stuff up, and I was kind of teetering in the middle. And I was like, you know what? Like, this is my life, and I need to own it. And it goes back to your question about happiness. It's a choice. You have to, there's hard days, but you have to kind of have that as your focus and know that is who you are. So just unpacking the rest of it.
Wow. That's so, that is such a hard thing to get to. I think that place in your head where you have been through truly the most horrific aspect of life. And then you figure out that, like, right, no one is going to make me go to work today. Like, no, I have to find it somewhere deep in my body, not only the will to go on, which I'm sure you struggled with, I don't want to speak for you, but yeah. in just to get up, right? Like, I don't want to even get up in the morning. Some people struggle with, I don't want to get up. How do I get up? Right. But you just have to, what you say, just
you get up and one day at a time, and you do the thing, right? And right. No one's going to make you. I had one of a professor at the college I went to do a fireside chat with me a couple of years ago, and I didn't think my school wanted anything to do with me, because I was just after the incident. I grazed through. I wasn't, I used to be super academic, prior, and.
You must have been in a fog.
Happiness.
You must have been in a fog, Nina. Yeah, I mean, you had to have been, right?
You're bang on, Jill, because I said to her, I would come to class.
Yeah.
And I had no clue. Like, I would leave, and I had no clue what the prof talked about for the last hour. Like, literally, right. I would study so hard and get a C, and people that were just winging it were getting A's, and it was so frustrating. And she looked at me, and this is like probably 20 years later, and she said, the fact... We had a pre-call before this fireside chat. She goes, the fact that you rolled out of bed and put your clothes on and showed up to class is a miracle. And, I had tears, because there's so much validation, right? Because I was in a fog and I couldn't focus. And I also repressed and suppressed a lot. I kind of toxic positived my way through the next 15 years, which I also wouldn't. Sometimes that's what you do to survive. I also didn't have the tools in the 90s of mental health and, the support we needed. So it was, when I went to the monastery that I kind of was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff sitting here that to kind of be dealt with.
Sure. Well, I would think you would have to really, forgiveness, and that's what you talk about the book too. And that's part of letting go, right? I mean, there's so many types of forgiveness, though, and one of them is forgiving others for various things, like you said.
Yeah.
But forgiving yourself for not knowing what maybe you wish you knew.
Yeah, and I'm, every moment in my life had its purpose, and I'm really at peace with it all. I think the biggest forgiveness journey I went on was with my dad. And that was like right before I started my business and wrote my book. And, someone said to me, we all have only so much capacity. It's like we have a drawer. So if we're like holding on to like the tchotchkes from Florida and like all the things left in dust, there's no space to bring in the new, right? So I had this epiphany that I'm still holding on to anger and resentment, and he's dead and gone.
Right.
He's gone. So who is it affecting? It's affecting me. Right. It's affecting my happiness. And so forgiving him was a really tough process of not forgiving the act, but, and we talk about, there's about 10 tips on the forgiveness chapter of like, there's so many ways to forgive, and it's so personal. And, but you can forgive someone who's no longer here. You can forgive someone who you never want to talk to again.
Right.
Forgiveness isn't this like romantic period piece where, oh my God, I'm sorry. Like you could, it's something in your mind. It's freedom, because you're letting go with my dad. I went through empathy. It was 1997. He was an aerospace engineer, worked in corporate. My mom worked in corporate, but he was gravely ill. He was gravely ill. He was severely depressed. I don't know if he was if he were to be diagnosed, if he had bipolar, what else could have been there, but he had no help. And it was as a Southeast Asian man in the 90s, there's no way you're getting it, right? There's just no way.
Right.
So, and he was my age now, when he did it, and I just think, wow, you must have been so sick, and you never, and that's kind of what, I did a whole, walking down, his childhood, and what did you go through? What traumas did he face to, have that kind of rage? So it was a journey, but I always say forgiveness is freedom, and we're not making things right with the person. Like, we don't have to, make up. Like, it could just be something in your mind. Like, a lot of the things we take personally are not ours. They're theirs.
Well, that's a good point, right? Like, you don't, whether the person is here or not, you don't have to maybe have that physical conversation with them saying, I forgive you. You can just say to yourself in the quiet moments of your life, and I'm letting it go. Like, I can't keep this in my life,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a choice, right?
Yeah.
Talk about happiness. Can I control that this happened? Could I do anything to bring my brother back? No. But again, the 90% is how you react, right? Mm-hmm. So these are where the choices come in, and the can't control. Like, there's things you can't control. People, you can't control situations, you can't control illnesses, you can't, so how are you going to show up for yourself in adversity, right? And that's my whole thing is, you asked earlier about the path is like, I knew from a young age, it's like giving hope through adversity. And I kind of, I'll be a little, say this and say, I throw out to the universe, like, okay, this is what I want to do. You show me how it should manifest,
Right.
That's the letting go of the business piece. You plan and you hustle, and then you let go and see where the cards land.
Well, I've learned that. I've tried to, some days I'm good, some days I'm not, for meditation. And it's really, when you say, like, it's the control thing. So when you start to kind of, I think, just for me, it's just quiet. I don't need to sit with my knees crossed, you know what I'm saying, in the position. And I feel like so many people have said to me, I can't meditate. And it's like, you don't have to make it a big formal thing. Just close your eyes.
Just close your eyes.
That's it.
Yeah. The biggest thing I get is like, I can't meditate. Why? My thoughts won't stop. Well,
exactly.
Your thoughts are never going to stop. Your mind is 60,000, right?
Right.
So be present. And that's why meditation can be a lot in the beginning, because people aren't used to sitting quietly with their thoughts.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, whoa.
Right.
But you get into this, you learn the skill of chatty mind, observing mind. You learn how to, and there's different techniques. You can see yourself as the depths of the ocean, and your thoughts are just the waves. And people who struggle with anxiety, sometimes it's like they think they are their thoughts. And it's like, we're so much more than our thoughts. We're like consciousness and happiness and joy and all these things. But, so observing the thought and knowing that sometimes the wave is going to come in with a bit of seaweed. Sometimes it's going to be a tsunami. Sometimes it's going to be light and bubbly. But those thoughts, it's getting to a state where you're observing them versus like the hurricane getting enthralled in them.
I think I agree with you. And I think what you brought up, I think you wrote in the book, like, control can be toxic, because we all are trying so desperately to control everything, everyone around us. And that's what I think is the most harmful thing. We want people. Right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I open on some of my corporate workshops with we think we have so much more control over life than we actually do.
Right.
And if we can just assess that, I tell people to have a visual mental bucket of can control, can't control. And again, I had a monk say to me, every time you think about something you can't control, it's a dead thought. It's dead. It's not propelling you forward in any way. It's energy draining. So be aware. Like, and those are 2, 3 a.m. thoughts are usually of people and situations that we cannot control. So put it in the can't control bucket. What can you control? At minimum, you can control how you're reacting.
Right. You can't control how people act towards you. You can't control what they say and what they do. So, like, at that point, you have to, like, I don't want to say stop caring, but realize it's just really out of your hands. Like you have to be okay with that. That's why control freaks have such a hard time, right?
Yeah. And, it's a tricky question because it's like, I'll get like, well, I hate my job, why? Well, you can always leave, right? But some people are like, I don't want to leave. I'm getting the pension and whatever it is. So it's like you can control it by leaving, but if you can't know your parameters, if you can't leave, then you can't control the jerk in, legal or in marketing, you know kind of where you're willing, what levers you're willing to pull and what you can and can't control about them.
We have about a minute, 35 seconds left, Nina. And so how on a scale of 1 to 10, how important would you say for anyone and everyone to just start meditating, just start closing your eyes for a little bit every day?
It's such a personal path, and I would never push it on anybody. I would just say it's changed my life. I notice days I'm off. If you're like a gym person, you don't go to the gym and you're off that day. It's like that for my mind. And we take so much care of our bodies, the makeup we wear, the dressing, but this is like going to the gym for your mind. So it's all like, and I tell people, start with a minute a day. Just start with a minute a day. Then the next day, do 2 minutes, or 1 week, do a minute. Like you said, it doesn't have to be this big, intimidating thing. And there's no right way to meditate. My practice has changed over 18 years so many times. So lean into what works for you. It's not this big, intimidating thing, but it is so incredibly rewarding in understanding and being aware of your mind.
Oh my gosh, a big thank you. Oh, gosh, Nina Purewal, you were fantastic, and I would love to have you back on because I think we could talk for another hour or two.
I'd love to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Nina.
That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you've been listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Head to Powerful Women USA to get on the newsletter, listen to previous shows. I'm Jill Conway, and thank you so much for listening to the show, celebrating and empowering women. I hope you are inspired to pursue your goals, believe in yourself, and dream bigger. I'm here to remind you that your voice matters and that your story has power. I hope you join me next time.